Let's get the meeting started. Let's see, Jeff, are we broadcasting and recording?
We are, we should be live on YouTube and soon.
Great. Well, this is the April 17th, 2025 meeting of the City of Harbor Springs, Michigan Planning Commission. It's 5:30 local time. We start with the roll call, please.
Bill Mulder.
Here.
Barry Lustgarten.
Here.
Michael Behrman.
Here.
Bob Buckner. Here. Vanessa Warren.
Here.
Kenny Stewart. Here. Tony Johnson is absent. Chip Everest. Here. Mark Day. Here. And Annika Alonsi is absent.
And why is she absent?
I believe she's at a robotics thing, right?
National competition in Boston.
So, okay, yeah, super cool. That is very cool.
Yeah, good luck to our team. All right, we take a look at the minutes from last meeting, which seems like a long time ago now. It was March 20th.
I move to approve the March 20th meeting minutes.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Are there any corrections? Anybody notice anything? Members of the audience? All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, minutes have been approved. And the next thing on the agenda is public comment or correspondence. And this is the part where members of the public in person and online can tell us what's on your mind, helpful suggestions, ideas for anything that's not on the agenda tonight. And I'll go over the things that are on the agenda tonight. It's a public hearing on guest orders for 125 Summit Street. Assessor's report, zoning administrator's report, review red lines of zoning articles 6, 7, and 9, and then a first look at articles 10 and 11. So are there any comments that we ought to know about?
Mark Rondell, 181 old. Since there's been kind of a hiatus since the last meeting, I had a chance to do some reading. And there are two planning books that are fairly recent. One that came out a couple of years ago that I would highly recommend to both to you folks. Arbitrary Lines by M. Nolan Gray, and a book that John Eichelangeli loaned me, Metro Coalescence by a guy named Sky Tallman. Both of these are planners and very experienced city people in different aspects. And there are a lot of great consistencies between these books. And I would like to read one short little paragraph from Metro Coalescence, the book that John sent me. This fellow has some great planning concepts and ideas, and he puts them together in very good ways. One of the things he talks about in here is a village concept of planning, a small, sort of a traditional type town, reminds me a lot of Harbor Springs. And he goes over a number of specific points that he would include in his discussion of village planning. And point number 7, the last one, is a village is not a resort community. It does not exist primarily to serve the lifestyle or aesthetic preferences of people who are retired from, work in, or want to escape from cities. It is a social and economic system that supports many of its inhabitants. A village provides livelihoods. The lifestyle that results, as attractive as it may be, is only incidental. And that I thought was a very good summation of a lot of things that I feel about Harbor Springs. There are other consistencies. They talk about zoning from its inception and how it's been used to segregate different uses, different classes of people. It's oftentimes very exclusive. It excludes different things, develops a lack of diversity oftentimes in neighborhoods planning, and it enhances sprawling growth, which ties in with my little talk the other day about the map and the need for concentrated and dense growth. And also, so I want to tie that in real quickly, with our ice event that we have recently gone through. And how I think it's very important that we draw some very serious conclusions from what happened during that event. We can't forget how disastrous it was for a few days, even if we get cleared up and so on. And we need to recognize the advantages of dense and compact growth and development. In town here, we had a rather rapid restoration of services. There are still people in the hinterlands and not very far in the hinterlands who don't have their services back. The cost benefits of all this, it costs much less to restore the services to us in the city versus it costs much less. Just this afternoon, I was out at my father's in Brutus. There are crews all over the place, still working. You know, thousands of dollars an hour going out and restoring services out there, whereas relatively, we paid very little. Anyway, these are just things I'd like to bring to your attention and say, I think it's very important that you think about the planning aspect.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments or ideas? Great. Okay, well, let's move on to the agenda then. The first thing is the public hearing on guest quarters for 125 Summit Street. And Jeff, what do we need to do here?
So we have a request for special land use. It's a kind of a two-parter. One is guest quarters located within an accessory building. And the second part of it then also is special land use for accessory building that's 2 stories. And Reed Romaine is the applicant at 125 East Summit Street. And we can hand it over to Reed to explain what he wants to do and why.
Okay. Should we start the public hearing part right now?
Yep, first we should have a motion to open the public hearing and we'll let Reed start that off and then we can go back to then any comment or concerns that the community has.
Okay. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing? Kenny Stewart says he's making a motion.
Second.
We have a second from Barry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. All right, the public hearing is open. Mr. Romaine, would you like to tell us about your project? And do you want the podium? Carter Williams could wheel that right over to you.
Maybe.
Thank you, Carter.
Well done.
So we live on 125 East Summit Street. And we have one garage, it's 16 by 32, and its dimensions are as bad as they can get. You can't, other than if you have a small vehicle. We have a full garden stuff and tools and stuff like that, so we really don't have a garage to park a vehicle, and so our vehicle is always sat outside. And we have another vehicle that's been its whole life in storage unit since we moved up here. It makes sense in Harbor Springs, if you're gonna take the effort to build a garage, you might just go 2 stories out because it adds resale value. And we do have 4 kids, and if we should ever finish it, it would be a place for people to stay. To be honest with you, even though it's designed as 2 stories, we don't have any immediate
I'm
plans.
sorry, could you hold on just a second? So we have that static again from one of these microphones.
Let's replace
It
his.
could be his.
It could
Yeah.
be.
Could you use this one instead?
I think it might have been the proximity of the 2 microphones on, so it seems to be gone.
So you tell us if you're getting static again back there, okay? Okay, sorry.
So, and one of the holes that we had in our plan is that we didn't have a plan for services, for instance. Well, that's because we don't have an immediate plan to develop it upstairs, but we, nevertheless, it made sense to have 2 stories. And that's consistent, I think, even with the way that the planning committee eventually, originally wanted to go. Likely the only service that we run out to is electricity. I mean, we don't know. But we were forced to, because of cost, logically it makes sense to run services out there before building, but But when we talked to the architect / builder, he said that he could provide the underground so that it could be hooked up if we ever did want to. So, but the real need is, we need a garage, and we decided to go 2 stories as quote unquote a bonus to have it up there. We don't have any intention of renting it out in the future, even if we had a new zoning code. Some people are concerned about that. If anybody knows me, I'm a little too anal to let someone live in my own place. And it's just, pretty much it in a nutshell. That's the story. It is a 3-car garage, but we have 2 trucks. That's 2 gone right there.
Are there any questions from the planning commission before we get some public comment?
Mine or something. Yes, hi, this is Kenny Stewart. The site layout shows that the new building you intend to build would be 5 feet from the rear property line. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what the plan.
What input have you had from your neighbors about that distance? Anything?
No input.
Do they know about the project?
Well, they all received a letter, and I communicated, with the neighbors around the neighborhood as I saw them. Yes.
Okay. And you intend to keep the current garage as well? Is that
Yes.
right?
Was there something about other accessory buildings on the?
Oh,
property?
on that one question, the last 2 years, we did renovate our house. And off and on, there were things parked in our garage. I'm not sure what happened in that November 22 day, but there must have been, my guess is that there could have been anything materials to a construction trailer. We owned a travel trailer for a time, and we do have, I call it a tent or a temporary thing out there, and I call it my easy bake oven, and it's great for painting, to dry and painting things, keeping bugs out of it, but it's temporary. It was never meant to be there forever. I mean, it's certainly not the prettiest thing in the world, but I think that's addresses the one question.
Just a couple other questions. I'm not clear on what your intent is for the utilities. Will this building tap into the existing utility system for your house?
On the current code, it would have to, but I learned more recently by talking to Jeff. I did talk to Jeff, and I talked to Lucas one day, although I did get a different impression from both of them. There is some, under certain circumstances, I guess there is some flexibility whether or not the services can be unique. The default is that they must feed off the existing volume, but apparently there's a clause that they can be with the whatever acceptance from the city manager, I think, for Rich said. Ours isn't very straightforward. Like Lucas mentioned, that maybe the best way would be going all the way from the backyard around to the front of our house and tying into the sanitary drain. Well, that's like not a mile away, but that's a long way off. And getting into the basement of an old house like that as crawl spaces isn't easy either. Then the next option would be going right down the driveway and tying in separately. And Jeff says, no, you can't do that. So I don't know if that could turn out to be so expensive that we wouldn't even do it, other than electricity.
So
In the short term, the next person would do it. Maybe our kids would do it.
So do you plan to plumb the new building to sewer and water?
Not initially, no.
Okay.
But, I'm gonna do my due diligence before we break ground to see. But I have a feeling just to get all the utilities, I can imagine $50,000 just easily to do all that. I don't know what it would cost. I think it would be staggering to retrofit that.
So the building you're proposing then would basically be a spacious 3-car garage with unfinished space in the second.
That's the way we're going. We were in Alabama, and I took an Excel spreadsheet, and we did you know, the dimensions we had, I said, what could we put up there? And then the builder architect copied it and resized it and put it in there. That's how that ended up in the drawing. Plus, Jeff said anything that was two-story, we have to go through this agonizing process anyway.
I'd just like to provide a couple points of clarification. So, yeah, the zoning code does say if there's ever space in an accessory building that could be made habitable, then they have to go through the special land use process for guest quarters. Or if there would be space on a second floor that it would exceed 50% of the square footage of the first floor, then they would have to go through that process also, which is kind of why we're here asking for special land use.
I see.
There's also language in, and I can't recall if it's the city code or the zoning code that states that all accessory buildings shall be metered, or basically 1 meter for the property. There is an exception that he can go to the city manager and kind of explain why he feels he has a need for a second meter on the property, and the city manager has the ability to provide that approval. The last thing that I would like to point out, and this is maybe a minor thing, the zoning code does have a limitation of 2 accessory buildings for the property. He does have the one permanent one there and then the other temporary, which we still would consider, we don't really differentiate in the zoning code between temporary or permanent. So that other temporary one would need to come down. Also, there is language in the zoning code that states that the total square footage of his accessory buildings cannot exceed 75% of his principal building. And so we did the math, and I think that's noted in the application. It does require that he has to build a small addition onto the home in order to stay in compliance with that 75%. And so we do see marked here in red on the site plan that there is an addition onto the back of his home that he's doing to maintain that compliance. So one condition that I think might be appropriate to include is that the approval of the accessory building be contingent that he must at least start or finish the addition to the back of his home before he's issued zoning permit approval.
And that's reasonable.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, and thank you for that. Since it could be developed, the second story could be developed someday to be an apartment, let's say, then the approval for that needs to happen at this juncture or at that someday when it gets developed.
No, we're looking to provide that approval today, because realistically, once that structure is framed in and built, the likelihood that we would even know at some point in the future if that improvements upstairs were finished, you know, it might happen without us even knowing. You know, depending on what level of finish he's doing, it may or may not even require building permit approval. So we've just basically said, if that space can be made habitable in the future, we're going to address that approval process right now to make sure that it's done and we don't have to worry about, you know, something like that when he's finishing the project at that point.
Thank you. One final area. I drove by your home. I think I have it right. It's a stone lower, and then the upper half is a white siding or wood siding or something. So how would you describe this new building and how is it alike or different than your home?
Well, I laughed when I read that about it has to be. I won't tell you what I once called our house when I saw it, but we put a lot of lipstick on the old pic to make it look better. It's, you know, it's not like we're a newly designed home that, you know, that you see an Architectural Digest magazine or something like that. But we've done as much as we can to spruce it up. So try to get a accessory building that looks like that would be an insult to accessory building. I'm being cruel, but the one that we designed, even though the renditions don't look too good, because it was a builder architect arrangement, it will be like it, meaning that it'll have white vinyl siding, white trim. The garage doors are Haas, and there's a little garage door in our first accessory building. I think that was over $1,000. I can't remember, but it was very expensive. But even our accessory garage, we have Anderson windows in it. In our house does, so it'll have Anderson windows. Our house has serpentine cedar shake like in the gable ends. It'll look like that. But as far as it looking just like a house, that would be impossible, but it will be a cottage kind of look, which is consistent to the town.
Just a couple questions. Could you go back to the site plan, please? Okay, like in the past, when we've had this type of request, and it's a two-story structure, and it's very close to a property line. Past applicants have agreed to move it 5 feet further away, so that you don't have this very large structure that close to your neighbor's property. It's not required, but that's something that we have asked other applicants to consider. The other thing that I'd like to just ask you about a little bit is the proximity of the two accessory buildings. They're just 5 feet apart. Is there a reason for that?
I think that was a bad judgment on our part. I
Yeah.
think they should be, because I think they should be at least 8 feet apart and maybe even 10 feet.
I would suggest 10 feet, just because
That was a mistake.
the building code, typically when you have adjacencies, 10 feet is like the magic number.
Five is in the-
Fire codes.
5 is minimum in the
Yeah, I
code,
understand,
but
I
it
understand
was
that.
bad judgment on our part to go
Yeah,
on that.
yeah, but in the Michigan residential building code, and also the Michigan building code, the 10 feet is like the magic number.
Yeah.
And then a lot of other goofy building code requirements go away. And I also would just suggest that, it makes it more usable, perhaps, as far as accessing buildings, all that kind of stuff. Jeff, remind me, the last one of these we had is just a few years ago. I was thinking of stuff on Ottawa Street or somewhere up in there, or Maple perhaps. And people had a two-story structure and they agreed to move it further in. And I know like that worked its way into the new zoning code that we're not using right now. Do you remember just how that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So this came up, I think, in a couple of different requests. Specifically, we had Gordon Andrews with a request on Second Street with an accessory building with the guest quarters above, and I forgot the other one. But in both, it was pretty much the same concern. I think historically, when we set that side yard and setback and rear yard setback for accessory buildings at 5 feet, at the time, most of the accessory buildings that were being built were 1 story. Now, more frequently, we're seeing requests for 2-story accessory buildings. And, I think most of the requests we've had have been pretty well receptive by neighboring property owners, with the one exception being that close proximity to a property line with a building that's that tall. So in both of those other requests, I think it was the planning commission felt that proximity and that privacy issue tied in with one of the standards being a potential issue. And so there was a communication between the applicant and the planning commission to move that building a little bit farther away. I think in the one case, it was a side property line that was a concern. Where
That's the
they,
one I remember.
yeah, where they can be, an accessory building can be 5 feet, where a principal building has to be 8 feet. And so the applicant was willing to move it from 5 to 8, where he would be able to build a regular principal building anyway. And I think in the other case we had, it was a rear property line, and there was a concern of privacy where they moved it from 5 to 10. And I believe that based on those decisions, that's how we came up with proposed language in the 2024 code that was adopted and repealed, which of course we'll relook at moving forward.
Right, okay. So I just want to make sure that we're being consistent.
And those are, I believe those are smaller lots. And that's not our issue here. 2 of the neighbors on the west, their accessory buildings are like 3 feet, well, the one's about 4 feet from the lot line. 2 of them are 3 foot from the lot line. And our lot is what, 160. Well, the lot that's behind us to the north is almost as deep as ours, I think is. And it's not, the issue comes in when you can look in my house or whatever. And that's not the case at all in this particular matter. We have a lot of space between the backyards of the homes, the rear setbacks on both homes, north of us and ours.
Primarily at the 5 foot setback on that yard behind you.
Pardon?
You're talking about where the 5 foot setback is, that it
No,
lot.
I'm talking about the two lots that are north of us.
Yeah.
Are also very deep, and those homes are situated toward the front of those lots also. So they have spacious backyards. They have, each of them have small sheds in them, but there are also several. Well, Bob was out, Bob took a field trip to our, you can, it's probably better to, he's more legitimate source than me. No, you're okay, we can do party. But
That's all I have.
the lot to the north is gonna have to be 150 feet deep anyway. So we're talking about a lot of distance.
Yeah, I have one quick question. You said that the neighborhood was notified. Do we have any negative feedback on that?
The neighbors I talk to on a daily basis, you know, I talk.
Did the city receive anything negative?
I didn't receive any mail correspondence regarding this topic, but there are a neighbor or two that are present in the audience that I'm sure he'll probably comment from when we get to that section at the time.
Thank you.
Are you still hearing the static back there when Jeff speaks? Okay, Jeff, I think you got the bad mic.
I think it's these two mics in close proximity. Because my mic wasn't doing that when that mic was off, but now that that's on, we're getting. So I'll just try to keep mine off as much as possible.
First of all, thank you for request and your time coming here and all that. Getting back to the utilities, yeah, so we're not quite sure what you're gonna do with them at this point, correct? So the garage portion, I'm assuming that we're unsure whether there's gonna be lights in the garage or
That
a
obviously at
garage
some
door
point on that.
opening. Pardon me?
Obviously, we'll have to accommodate that at some point, yes. That would be a
Right,
high
I
priority,
guess-
first priority.
I'm wondering why that would not be presented in the plans at this point. It seems like there has to be electricity out there.
Well, see, I thought this scenario was to talk about the placement, 2 stories, and whether or not to do it.
Okay.
I got sort of blindsided when I got the report from the consultant that was an issue. I didn't learn that until Monday when everybody else got the email
Gotcha.
with the link.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And when I clicked on the link, it didn't even work. I was wanting to call the city to say that I got a 404.
Sorry about that. Okay, well, I just.
But from your position, I know you have to assume that I'm gonna finish it. I understand that. I mean, that's the process.
Right,
And,
Or that
you know,
someone's-
you know, I could go out here today and change my mind, right? I'm not gonna try to, but it's not a high priority to me. Cause I just know it's gonna cost a lot of money.
But
And-
we can't approve it without the utilities.
Well, I think, if we're talking about utilities, at some point in time or another, there will be at least electric, more than likely, water, sewer, potentially if there's a bathroom and whatnot there. I think we can look past that. They're going to have utilities going to the site. It's just a question of where they run them, and we can certainly address and review that when they submit their zoning application for zoning approval. Unless you feel that there's some aspect about where they might run the electric water sewer lines that may have an impact on neighbors, that it becomes a concern that we would need to address through special land use. If we don't think that that's going to impact the concerns of neighbors, maybe we can look past that until we're
Next step.
actually doing the zoning review for approval that they can start building. Unless, John, do you have any other thoughts regarding that may be a concern that we need to address at this meeting?
I think you could add it as a condition of approval. That they have to come back to the city with their utility plans at that time.
From the city's perspective, the good thing is that 3 out of the 4 utilities or services you own. You got the gas company, which you don't. You got water, sewer, and electricity. You got 3 out of the 4 that I can't do it unless, so I'm a retiree of DT Energy in Michigan, unless I climb coal and steel power, or if I run gas to water hoses like happens in the downstate. But I'm not gonna do that, but you have a lot of leverage.
The other question I had too was, I don't have a mic, so I'm gonna talk loud. I'm gonna pretend like I'm yelling at the kids at the back of the bus, sit down. So the access, I'm assuming that you'll have to do some concrete cement work, back there as well.
And at least an approach, in front of the garage,
Right, is there currently,
there's an asphalt driveway there
Okay.
that has an island in the middle. Kind of. That runs to the legacy garage. It's old asphalt. It's probably from 1990. I'm just guessing that's when the house was added on to. I have no idea.
We've had a few questions about topography or surrounding area. Would you guys, would it help if I pull up an aerial photography?
Yeah, and
to
I've
show
tried to
his
look at-
driveway and the surrounding homes?
I know I've looked at it as well, or tried to, but I wanna just, I'm assuming there won't be grading issues. With putting, I don't know how much concrete or pavement will be necessary. But that's something we need to consider too. Would there be grading issues? For the neighbors or anything like that? It's. With all due respect, the drawing is a little. The site plan is a little incomplete. I'm not an architect and don't pretend to be, but. With all due respect, sir. Yeah.
I did bring a Google map of the neighborhood, by the way. It does show where the existing homes are in case I did bring that for all the planning committee folks.
So I pulled up the aerial here. I'm not sure if people online can see this, but this is Reed's house here at 125 East Summit Street. And he has a driveway coming in on the side with a little roundabout right here in the back. He's got an existing structure right here. And this is where he's proposing to place the accessory building with guest quarters. So there's access in that general area. He would probably need to put in an apron or
A
something.
little approach.
Approach for it. But he certainly has a decent driveway here accessing that area. And then we can see we've got a house here behind him, another house here. They've got one building there. I think mostly the buildings that are in close proximity of him are to the west a little bit right here. There's a property line that his existing accessory building is very close to with some neighbors there around him.
These are the buildings I said are 3 foot from the lot line. And this is the neighbors to the north on Snyder.
How tall is the shrubbery in the back there? Substantial. It says it is, yeah, it's big. Arborvitae's, it's pretty substantial.
I hope if that helps to clear up some of what's there and surrounding him there.
How do you access the existing garage? Because it looks like you're coming from the wrong way, if it's lengthwise.
Well, it runs north and south. Yeah. The door goes in from the east. And the driveway, it has that island and it ends right at that.
Okay, so you enter from the east, it's not the,
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a one
gotcha.
car.
Yeah.
It only has one door. And the reason why we want the garage set back, so we can have as much space on that end of the garage, plus to conserve the core of our yard.
John, can I ask a question about your suggestion on conditional approval as it relates to the whole utility issue? Are you suggesting that it's conditional before we even start the project? Or the garage can be built, but it would be conditional on finishing the occupancy or the second level mother-in-law suite, for want of a better description.
Yeah, the condition would be that issuance of utility permit would be required prior to construction of the second floor dwelling.
The second floor dwelling. Okay. So when you say construction, you mean finishing it out?
Finishing it out.
Yeah, okay. So that would allow Reed to at least build the garage and have a shell on the second floor.
Yeah, and as Jeff had mentioned previously, based on the submission of the plans and the floor plans, it does show a 2-bedroom, 2-bath
Right.
dwelling unit, so you have to review it with that in mind
Right.
as part of your decision making.
Yeah.
So even though he doesn't want to build it now,
Right.
a special use approval runs with the land, not with the property owner. So he could sell it, and then the next property owner has the ability, if they meet the conditions, to do the installation of the dwelling.
Conditional to the stipulation that it's a single utility service, right?
Yes.
I think what would be most appropriate is at the time when he submits his plans for zoning approval, that we would review his utility plan as part of that approval. And I could loop in Lucas with the DPW to review it and make sure that he's comfortable with what they're planning. And then if he's proposing to have a separate metered service, the city manager would make the determination if that's acceptable or not.
Okay, any more questions?
So if zoning approval would occur later, then what are we talking about now?
Well, you're
The garage.
talking about approving the plan as submitted, giving him the authority to build the 3-car garage with the dwelling unit on the second floor, with the condition that before he finishes the second floor, he's required to obtain from the city all the necessary permits. That's the trigger for the review. And the second condition would be that the garage needs to be built 10 feet away from the existing garage. Per what Mark was saying, these are the conditions I'm coming so far.
Okay, and he's free to figure out electrical how he wants.
How he wants
And then we need the condition of the removal of the other
other structure.
dwelling. We have
Yes.
another dwelling, so we'd have to have a condition of that.
I think about 10 minutes.
And then, were you thinking about maybe moving it a little bit further away from the property line?
I could compromise some, but I want to keep it back as far as I can, really do.
Are there others in the room we need to hear from?
Yes,
Yeah,
there are.
absolutely. So part of the process of a special land use is we're recognizing that it is something that can be done in a residential district. However, there is a higher potential that there may be negative impact on neighbors. So by reaching out to the neighbors and letting them review the plans and coming in and being part of the discussion, we can hear from them and address and determine whether any property owners around may be negatively impacted. And if the project can move forward with minimal impact on those neighbors, then we can go ahead and approve it or approve it with conditions that might affect that for the better. And so, yes, the next thing that we need to do is certainly hear from members of the community to see if they have any concerns, or some of them may be in favor of the project or anywhere in between.
The other condition we need to talk about is in addition to the primary residence, make the math work. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, conditions, right. All right, should we go to the public? Commissioner, are you satisfied for the minute? All right. Anyone in the audience have any ideas on this?
Yes, my name is Jane Bagara and I'm the neighbor directly behind Reed. And we're year-round residents and we believe this 2-story apartment, 3-car garage would be a negative impact on our property value. Our concerns are, number one, the privacy. The grade in our backyard kind of exacerbates the privacy to our property. The proposed 2-story apartment back window would look directly into our bedroom window and backyard. There's no hedge we could plant on our property that could reach the height to block this new structure because of the way that our backyard is sloped and the retaining wall and the hedge are located. So, he has a retaining wall that's approximately about 5 feet tall. And the proposed, two-story apartment and garage would be on top of that. So in actuality, it would probably be about 30 feet tall, all said and done from our backyard up. So privacy is the one thing, also the setback being in such close proximity to our property line, which is 5 feet. If there's a 5-foot setback, there is a retaining wall, and then he has a hedge on top of the retaining wall. So our yard goes up like this, there's a retaining wall, and then there's a tall hedge line on top of that. So this retaining, his property stakes are on the other side of the retaining wall. So if you go from his stakes, there's the retaining wall, then his hedge, it's going to be right on that wall, which I feel that, the retaining wall is very old. It's like 25 years old. And last year Reed was talking about the integrity of it. So I brought a picture, if you want to pass it around, of the retaining that's standing in our backyard, looking at the retaining wall and the hedge. The hedge is now placed on Reed and Georgianne's side of the retaining wall, which would block only the bottom half of this 2-story structure. And he could remove that hedge at any time. And then we would just be looking up at, probably 30 feet, so close to our property line. And yes, our property is deep, but our home is there looking straight at it. So I just feel that it's, a large 3-car garage and a 2-story apartment located on a hill behind the homes on Snyder Street are not in harmony and character with the neighborhood. It's much too large, too tall. He already has, as you said, a 1-car garage and 2 canvas buildings. So if you can see that, that's my concern. 5 feet with the integrity of that wall. I just, if you start digging in and putting concrete brick in there so close to the property line, 10 feet pushing it back would maybe make sense, or maybe not making it so tall. But as he said, he doesn't want to do that. And we can't guarantee that he's not going to take that hedge down. And my last concern is they have had a open building permit for remodeling their house since 2021. And Reed and Georgianne have remodeled their house for a very long time. They do it by themselves. So they bring their saw out, their air compressor, their paint gun, and it's a constant noise that extends all summer long, all day. I don't know if there's any law in town that assures a contractor involvement and a timeline completion bond that could be set for this, so it's not an ongoing construction site for the next 10 years as being on our border. And larger setback, shorter, is our concern, would be better. Yes.
So you said the retaining wall is on his property?
Yes.
And do you know how many feet from the property line that is?
Well, there's probably a foot maybe.
Okay.
And then there's his stakes are like here, and then the retaining wall.
Do you know how thick that retaining wall is?
It's maybe about 4 feet.
Okay.
It's not very thick.
Okay.
And most of I don't know if you've driven down Snyder Street or Summit Street, but Summit Street has very tall houses on a hill. And then Snyder is very low, but most in between the homes there's a forested area. And then when it comes to our house and Reed's house, it's the only one that does have a retaining wall. So it's very sloped. So if there was a, massive rain, that could wash down into our backyard. And you're all welcome to come up, walk in our backyard and see the wall, see the hedge, see the height difference, and see how tall that building will actually be in our backyard. I don't know, maybe he could do a 3-car garage with an apartment on the side or something, or as you said, a 10-foot setback or more. And to leave a hedge would be nice. Those are my concerns. Thank
I have a question.
you. Yes.
feel a little bit like I'm Judge Judy or something. Have you two talked before this meeting?
No, he did not tell us he was going to do this.
How did you know to come tonight?
We received a letter in the mail and from the city that this was proposed. We pulled it up online and we looked at it. And that's why I'm here.
Yes, ma'am.
Mary Kay O'Donnell, 133 East Summit Street, so I'm the house immediately to the east. Just want to state that we have no objections. We are in favor of you approving this plan. We would probably be the most impacted by seeing it because that's where our backyards are right next to each other, and I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. Nothing else this ice storm taught us that things change. So things change. I do want to address a couple of things. Reed and Georgianne are very concerned about their neighbors. Never once in all of the years that they have been there have they made noise with any construction outside of the hours that are allowed. I've never heard it. They're very concerned about that. They do work with contractors. The improvements that they've made to their house definitely improved my house. And I know that this will be done tastefully. I know it will also be done. The construction will be proper. I've known these folks how many years now? Like, it will be done right. There is no doubt in my mind at all. The other thing I will say, just in reaction to Jane, is I don't think it's fair to say the height is going to be 30 feet tall. Our properties are our properties, right? So the fact that our neighbor's property is lower than ours, I don't understand how that could be or should be a factor. And if it is, I got a lot of problems because I sat through 3 years of construction in front of my house. And what I look out at is very, very, very tall. It's not my property, someone else's property. So I don't think that that's fair to say that it's going to be all that much taller, because on Summit Street, it's called Summit Street for a reason. We're higher than Steiner. So happy to answer any questions. Just want to let you know, my family and I have no objections to this whatsoever.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Sue.
I'm Sue Winter, and I live kind of kitty corner adjoining, almost. And I had talked to Reed and Georgianne a couple days ago, and they, I told them it looked like it checked all the boxes in terms of what's allowed. And I guess something that I would like to think about is how putting a house this is like a house, a whole house. It's big, and not just their property, but ADUs in general. And I remember flag lots were proposed at one time, which is a driveway going up the side and a house in back. This is very much like a flag lot, except it's maybe not over quite as far, but it's pretty much the same thing. A house in back of a house. And like, I know Reed and Georgianne aren't going to rent it, but houses change hands, and it could be another house someday. And I am concerned about the density issue, that if that were to ever happen. Our summers are very precious to us in Harbor Springs, and they're very short. And so people like to be outside. And in this case, and I think in a lot of proposed ADUs, there's about 4 patios that are right around that, where people spend their summers. Mine, it's your only refuge from all the hubbub in a tourist town is your home. So I guess I'm just subject to, in general, another house. This is right in someone's backyard. Not mine quite as much, but, and I wouldn't want it in mine, and I don't want it in anybody's backyard. You're getting, no, I don't think you and Georgianne are planning on, but you never know what the next person's going to do. And also, just the noise of construction. Like I say, the summer is precious. I know we built stuff in Harbor Springs, but it's very close. Being set in the back we're really close to these other people's areas and, I would love to see some kind of ruling or some kind of limit where it has to be done within a reasonable amount of time and not go on forever and ever and ever. It would just be comforting if the planning commission would think of that kind of thing. If more ADUs were gonna be built in areas, you know, this really does affect people's privacy. And looking down, I wouldn't want, you know, this house, if someone ever lives up there, will look right down onto the neighbor's property, which they thought they were gonna have a nice amount of privacy in their backyard. But I'm kind of speaking in general on all ADUs that this could happen. So please consider ADUs when you're approving, or privacy when you're thinking about approving ADUs, because think about if this is in your neighbor's backyard that you enjoy barbecuing out and you have house looking down. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, I think we can close the public hearing. If we have a motion to do that.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
You got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay.
Bill, who was the second on that one? Thank you.
All right, public hearing is closed. Now it's up to us to discuss if this should be approved. Well, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll go first. Honestly, it seems half-baked to me. I mean, it doesn't seem totally well thought out in terms of the second floor unit. And I don't like the negative impact on privacy to the neighbor to the rear. I am not for building the second floor unit. I would be okay with the garage and stuff, but not for anything that impacts privacy.
I'm in agreement to a significant degree. I also have another concern about it.
Excuse me, Mark, in agreement to what Chip just said?
What Chip just said.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification request. You know, the massing of it is quite large. I mean, it's essentially 2 stories stacked on top of each other, you know, because the dormers are essentially the roof. And so it's really massive. And I think it's significantly out of scale for a neighborhood. Because I do agree with the comments that it's like having another house down there. They do have a right to have one there. And it will allow certain sizes, but because it is a special land request, you know, as Jeff mentioned earlier, there's special concerns that could occur. Privacy is one of them, without a doubt. I would be very unhappy if I had to deal with this. You know, if I had a lot in town and somebody was going to do this, I would raise the same issues that Jane did. But I have another concern too. You know, with the retaining wall that's there and doing a structure like this on top of that, and I know these are just drawings here that aren't real to a significant degree, but you know, there's a footing issue where a footing has to be a certain depth for frost protection. And because there's a retaining wall there, that retaining wall is going to get blown out during construction. Machines moving around, all that kind of stuff. 5 foot off the property line has a very tight margin for construction. And given the fact there's a big grade difference there now, how's that going to be managed? Because there's water runoff that we have to be concerned about. And also it is going to appear quite a bit larger. I mean, I do think, you know, topography is topography, but there's a retaining wall that is going to be taken out due to construction. There's no 2 ways around that. And so my concern would be, okay, what's the plan for that? What does this really look like? And, you know, I just think this plan needs more work. It needs some finessing to get the massing correct, to get it down to a cottage scale, because it's not cottage scale right now in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. Thank you.
So Barry Lustgarten. So I kind of agree with Mark and Chip. I think on paper, he meets all the requirements. I think in reality, it's not really baked as far as planned. And I think that footing wise, I agree that that wall would be gone. I think that, it, I think for the gentleman that's presenting to us, I think it's his best interest to come with completely with all utilities that are in there. Because that's gonna put us in a situation where, he invested a lot of money in something that we're gonna have to either approve or not approve, in the future. So I think really coming with a full plan is better for us to make a better decision, so.
There seems like a lot of conditions that we would have to impose. I fear for the water runoff off of the roof and being 5 feet away from the property line that's could go onto the neighbor's property. Because I don't know how they would maintain those shrubs during construction either. So the high shrubs and the retaining wall are probably all going to be gone, and then there's possible drainage. Now, there could be gutters on this, but once again, we don't have that information.
I feel very conflicted about the whole thing, to be perfectly honest, because it does appear to satisfy the requirements of the ordinance. On the other hand, hearing neighbors express concern about privacy, and in particular, Mark, your comments about the likely erosion or destruction of the retaining wall, those are concerns, those are serious concerns.
But Bob, it doesn't satisfy
No.
it. If you look at the planner's report, it clearly doesn't satisfy it. And the only way we could get it through is if we put conditions on it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, with conditions, it's that.
Yeah.
Listening to everybody, I am in agreement. Generally, I feel that, our folks should have rights on their property to generally build ADUs. I believe that. I truly believe that. Yet, they do have to, this is a special land use request. It doesn't meet, the conditions. It doesn't meet the character, of the same construction character of the primary residence. I understand the issues though, but could there be something done that does? It seems so big that we've got to build a slight addition to allow the footprint to work. That to me says something. We're right on the border there. And with not meeting all these conditions and having to put a lot of conditional things into an approval, I don't feel good about that.
I'll just agree with everything that's been said. This is a big building. If you take, I don't know what size pickup trucks you have, but take a really long, large pickup truck, there's probably good 5 feet in front of that after you park your truck in this garage. And that makes for a very big building right up against the edge. We haven't heard anything about what this addition is going to be that is contingent on building the addition to the home. I know it's small, but we don't know what it is. I'm looking at a picture with bathrooms, but there's no plumbing plan yet figured out. I just think you gotta go back and do some more homework.
Okay, so, just, not even reading between the lines, reading right on the lines, it sounds like there's not support, for this request right now. We could have a vote on it tonight. Doesn't sound like it would pass, and once it does not pass, it cannot be brought back again. Is that right?
Not necessarily. So if it sounds like you guys are in agreement that he may, with conditions, meet the standards for zoning for regulations, but that he's not meeting the standards for special land use is kind of what it sounds like I'm hearing. What, if you're of a mind, what you could do is make a motion to deny the application. That still leaves him room that he could take the feedback that he's received tonight, go back to the drawing board, update his plans with the information that you would like to see on those plans, and come back with a modified plan. It would have to be substantially different or take into consideration the changes that you're proposing. If it was too similar to the same project, then I would have to tell him that he needs to make further modifications. But I think I've got a pretty good outline to work with him to address the things that you feel need to be addressed.
I also want to add, I mentioned something about the approach in concrete work or pavement work. I'd like to get more of a clear indication of that as well, because there is a circumstance where somebody paved practically the whole backyard to fulfill the approach to a new garage. And the neighbors didn't realize that, and I heard about it. So I think that I'd like to make sure that that's in a plan too.
Just need a more detailed
Yeah.
site plan.
I would just want to enforce the idea that whatever the applicant chooses to do, that comes back before a full committee. There's enough stuff hanging out there that I don't think can be done administratively.
With another suggestion would be, rather than denial, would be to postpone action. Time specific, give the applicant 2 months or 3 months to come back before the PC. And then if they don't come back within that period of time, then you can put it on the agenda and you can do your formal denial. But you're providing feedback. You should give the applicant the opportunity to go back and change the plans without doing a denial. You can postpone consideration.
Can we table it?
You can table it.
Just ask the applicant what he would like.
Yeah, you can ask
So
the
you have
applicant.
to withdraw it. Please, ready. Mr. Romaine, what do you?
The only issue I see is you're getting to the engineering of the project. Yeah, there is an issue in the back, and it's it's an engineering issue. Certainly that back of that foundation does have to have certain kind of reinforcements. But that's different than this approval. I think you're kind of getting in the weeds personally. And as far as you're not gonna find a place in the city where you're gonna have more privacy. I mean, we're talking about, the width of a normal city lot, 60 feet from the back of our lot line to the back of the house, if not more. The argument becomes ludicrous in my mind. And the thing that I find really almost humorous is that if you put this in the context of 439 that was approved, that was rescinded by the voters, if this discussion was made before then, all 439 might have come out differently instead of being able to do it but at will, or whatever the word is, by right. I mean, this whole discussion almost becomes a comedy. It really does. I'm almost happy I spent $850 just for this moment. It was well worth it. Because you're criticizing lack of engineering, lack of utilities. Those are really peripheral to this whole. I mean, I realize you have that requirement, but it's really peripheral to this whole thing. And, during the summer, I'm getting complaints from Jane. Meanwhile, there's a new middle school being built. The high school is being renovated. There's a state highway commission is pounding pilings at the state highway. The neighbor across the street has the whole side of their house gutted and they spray in foam. Neighbors on both sides of me are doing renovation. And I'm the one getting text messages making noise. And sometimes it's not even me making them. So the real problem is not what I'm doing. It's an ideological thing. It's a personal thing. If you just go on Google and Google our houses, I've got a yes. There you have, I don't know. It just, And I'm getting text messages saying, you know, if you're a good Christian, you wouldn't be making all this noise. Well, good Christian, I turned my cheek, I got smacked on that side. I turned my cheek the other way, and I got smacked. And the last time I had a conversation with Jane is that I wanted to service my wall. And she wouldn't let me on her property. So
Okay,
she said.
I think we're
beyond
getting off the merits of the request. Yeah. I was hearing more concerns than just reflected from Jane's comments. And right now it sounds right or wrong, like there's not support to approve this thing tonight. So I'm trying to think the most beneficial thing for you, Reed, to do, and I guess your choice would be, you could have the planning commission go ahead and vote on the request as it stands tonight, or you could voluntarily do some modifications and come back.
As long as you're specific, you know, very specific what you, so the expectations, because the expectations, you know, we're beginners at this. The expectations for tonight wasn't 100% clear.
Okay.
And I was with the when it came out Monday, those things I was aware of, like utilities. But, and especially when we got into the engineering, I would never have, to me, I think that's outside the scope. I understand it's important, I don't deny that.
Okay, so would you like us to vote on this tonight as is, or would you care to come back with some modifications and more details?
There's a difference in cost, right? If you guys deny it, then he has to pay again to come back. Am I correct? Am I correct?
I think that's
Whereas
right.
if you postpone it or you table it, then you don't have to pay the fee again. Because obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible, I mean.
Yeah, don't.
The benefit to Reed in us tabling
Yeah.
it tonight is that we would save him the cost of having to reapply. The downside is we would have to tonight table it for a specific date. So he would have to give us a date, let's say 2 months, 3 months out, and say, I will be ready on this day.
Yeah.
That's the downside. And that the benefit of us denying it today or whatnot would be that he's open for whatever timetable works for him. He's not set to a specific date where he has to come back. So Reed, if that has any thoughts on what you'd like to do. Do you have an idea of how long it might take you to put together the information that the planning commission has requested?
I need to know precisely, if you would let me know precisely what you need.
I think the big thing here that I'm seeing,
I think I know, but I want to make sure that
and correct me if I'm wrong, planning commission, but what I'm gathering from this is that we need to see a much more detailed site plan that includes some engineering work, engineering regarding the retaining wall, having some drainage plans as far as water runoff in the close proximity to the rear of the property there, also including utility work on that plan to show how those will be done, where they will be done. So I think really just a more complete and full site plan. Mark, do you have anything else?
Well, a lot of the comments were not structural in nature. My comments were specifically that that's a very large building, it's out of scale. It's not in any way relative scale wise to a cottage ADU, in my opinion. And essentially it's an overly large building and that the design needs to be readdressed so that it's more appropriate for a neighborhood.
But it does meet the requirements.
I'm sorry?
It does meet the requirements though.
For the zoning, but not for an ADU though, because we have to consider the neighbors and that's the height of it, the mass. You know, and that can all be modulated through architecture design. This is not it. So it's more than just structural issues in my opinion.
We also talked about setback. Well, if that could be adjusted and.
Setback between the buildings and also to the lot line.
Yeah, so.
Also, I'd like minimal but additional information about whatever this addition is going to be on the home. You know,
there's a document in the packet.
There was information about that in the package.
Okay.
The location of where it would be and what it would be. There was documentation.
Okay, so I'd like to ask the remains, what's your pleasure regarding the request tonight? Would you care to preemptive or proactively take it away and bring it back with some modifications, or should we vote on it tonight?
You can forestall it, but I can see, I could spend a lot of money on the engineering. I feel like I'm almost in a hostile audience, but. So. I guess feel about that would be a logical thing, but
90
I
days?
could envision spending thousands of dollars in engineering and come back and still be, I don't feel like we're not working in good faith. I really don't think so.
Would 90 days be a realistic target for you? Okay. All right, we have a motion to table this for 90 days.
Why don't we, so would that be July? We could, my suggestion would be to table it for the July 17th Planning Commission meeting. Does that sound reasonable? Reed, would that work?
But I need in writing from the planning committee exactly what you need from me. Precisely in writing.
I don't think that's yeah.
And if you're not gonna give me in writing what you want, I might vote tonight because.
You know,
I'm
I
not
think
gonna
what
guess.
could be done is to listen to the recording of this, pick up the main themes.
No, I want it in writing, specifically your thoughts. For me to take any action other than that would be
The
cool.
planning commission doesn't speak as one person. We have different opinions that are.
That's the problem. That's the problem. Everybody has their own opinion.
I don't think it's appropriate for us to list all the conditions that would allow us to pre-approve anything. I think that this is fully documented. You listen to it as many times as you like. You're here, you've heard the dialogue. It's pretty clear what the issues are that have been discussed.
You won't give it to me in writing, just vote tonight then. This is ridiculous. They're not, you can't be specific what you really want. So I'm not gonna come back. It's just craziness. Because everybody has a different opinion. So you might just have a meeting, a closed meeting, put together what you want.
All right. So, all right, Karen, let's go to the audience one more time. Maybe we can solve this together.
So, Reed has always been a great supporter of, the yes vote. And I don't feel, Reed, that, you have a hostile audience. I really don't. What I'm feeling is, matters that, after learning everything we have about zoning, they come up, all these questions, all these things. Everyone is trying to protect each other. You have an amazing neighbor right here in the black and white stripe that, is for everything, but these men and women are here for the small details. And, before, you submit to a shutting down of your dream, I think that you should reconsider and, table it and try to work within the parameters. Thank you.
I'm just looking for some specificity in what you want, because this could just.
Understand.
Is that unreasonable? I guess you're saying it's unreasonable.
I don't know how to get definitive opinions from 9 people that would give you, what would a pre-approved, checklist. It just, we aren't to that point yet. I didn't
mean hostile in the meet. I
know.
It's
hey, maybe I just give you some personal advice. Why don't you sleep on this? Let's all sleep on it. I have seen no downside to taking a 90-day postponement.
Right.
And think about it, sleep on it, and put some thoughts together. So, but you don't have to do that.
We understand my fear. Yeah, I hope you do. I hope you understand my concern.
I do. All right, last comment, Mark Rondell, and we're gonna move on.
Thank you, Mark Rondell, 181 old. I just have to say that this whole discussion is cutting straight to the core of what I have been trying to say in this chamber, in this town for decades. We have not addressed all of these questions appropriately in our master plan. We are not addressing these questions appropriately in our in-depth review of the zoning code in attempts to create a better zoning code. We are not addressing these specific questions. Arbitrary lines means arbitrary lines. Setbacks, height definition, everything is arbitrary in zoning. And we need to address those in order to be just to this applicant, in order to be just to ourselves, in order to save you people the agony of going through these meetings all the time. This is what I'm trying to say. We need to adequately define these things, like you say, ahead of time. That's why we need a better master plan, why we need much better specific articles in our code, especially the upcoming Articles 3 and 4 and 5 or whatever they are. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, one last comment, and then we're gonna close this thing soon.
I mean, why couldn't Reed, Reed, could you make it just a 2-car garage maybe? And a little more strategy? I mean, it seems like reworking it would be, very fun and you could, I know it's hard to think about it now. There's a lot of 2-car garages in the neighborhood. It fit in much better. I don't know. Thank you.
All right. Remains, do we have? What's your call? How do you, what play do you want to run here?
90 days.
So we probably need a motion from someone on the planning commission to table this request for 90 days.
I move that we table this motion for 90 days. Pick it up in.
Would you mind if we specify for the July 17th?
July
planning?
17th.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Let's do a roll call vote on this one.
Mark Bidet.
Yes.
Chip Everest.
Yes.
Kenny Stewart.
Yes.
Vanessa Warren.
Yes.
Bob Buckner.
Yes.
Michael Behrman.
Yes.
Barry Leskart.
Yes.
Bill Mulder.
Yes.
Motion to table is passed.
Well, that was painful for the remains and for the audience, but it was instructive. We're going to be talking about these exact issues in detail as we get into Articles 2, 3, and 4.
I'm on happy to be the guinea pig.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that.
Green, while you're working on this, if you have any questions and want some help, feel free to reach out to me and I'll help you however I can.
I'll be solutions when you have time. Props.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is the assessor's report. Jeff, you're gonna do that in the zoning administrator's report, which is an annual thing.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I've got about a 45-minute presentation put together.
No, we don't.
And all right, I'll keep it to as few minutes as I can. So this is an annual report that I do, just to kind of bring you guys up to speed on what's happening in assessing and zoning. The zoning report is required by the Planning and Zoning Enabling Act, whatnot. The assessor's report is just something that I do out of the kindness of my heart. Generally, I just want to bring up a couple things. So the consumer price index for the inflation rate multiplier was 3.1%. That affects the changes in taxable value that applies to all property throughout the state of Michigan. The last couple of years, it was at the maximum that was allowed by the state constitution of 5%. So we're down a little bit of 3.1, so that should be a little bit easier for property owners. All properties were assessed at fair market value. We saw about 5 to 10% increase on average. Some properties may have seen slightly increased, increases in their assessment beyond that. That's really based on the local markets in each of the regions within Harbor Springs. I've got a little graph here showing our median sale price, as we did have a bit of an odd bump in 2021 and 2022. We had some interesting sales going on there, but other than that, we've been basically stabilizing with some increases. New construction, again, we saw similar bumps in 22 to 23. Overall, we are continuing to increase with our new construction. And it's been pretty stable. One thing that we did see some large increases in was our DDA capture. Part of that was due to some transfers of ownership and uncappings within the DDA. Also, some new construction with the project across the street from the movie theater, with that property coming on the roll. So that directly adds to the taxable value, which then is captured by the DDA there. So that really helped them out quite a bit. We've got a graph here just showing the increase in the assessment and the taxable value in relationship to each other. Let's see the last
question.
Yep, go ahead.
The last data point on that chart, does that represent any 2025 data, or is that all 24?
Yeah, that is odd. I'm not, that should be 2025. So we've just finished the assessment roll for 2025. We've set those assessments. We've mailed out assessment change notices to property owners. We had a March board of review where property owners could come in and just discuss those changes with me. Those numbers are set, so I'm not sure why it's offset that like that, but that should be for 2025 itself.
All in data for 2025.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and we've got it here for each year. And I'm not sure why it looks like it's spacing out
Two years.
2 years apart there, which that should just be a data point for each year.
That's fine.
I'll look at my graph and see if I can't correct whatever's causing that. So that's really the information for the assessor's report, showing some of the changes with assessing. Does anybody have any questions on that report? All right, let's move on. So planning and zoning. Pretty straightforward. It's been kind of a busy year with all of the work that we've been doing on the zoning code. So we really didn't have a lot of formal training sessions. We had some impromptu discussions here as part of our meetings. But we didn't really do any formal education. I think once we get more into a regular pace of things, we'll get back to including more educational material and whatnot. I've got some information here about the permits that we've been issuing. Number of permits generally as a whole is kind of down compared to previous years. I'm attributing some of that based on my conversations with builders, that a lot of that is just kind of a hold off on waiting to see what happens with the new zoning code. And I think we'll see a bit of a resurgence there. Even though the number of permits is down, my discussion with builders, architects, homeowners, is still very high. So I think there's still a lot of interest, of course. Variances, the zoning board of appeals was again also similarly not burdened with many requests. I believe we had one variance request for a dimensional variance, and that was about it. Planning commission, of course, was very busy with the extra meetings we've been having regarding the zoning code. So we pretty much doubled our normal meetings that we would have each year. Current tasks is really just, I think, what everybody else is doing, right? Working on continuing as staff to support the planning commission in the review of the zoning code. I'm in the background working on updating some of the applications, making sure that they stay current with any of the changes that we may do, taking old applications and updating them, trying to make as many of them form fillable on our website as possible for people so that it's easiest for them to use them. That's really what I have for the zoning administrator's report. Does anybody have any questions about that? This really is a report also that deals more with issues that we're working on here at the Planning Commission. Is there any information on here that you don't feel is needed that you'd like me to remove? Or is there any information that's not on here that you'd like to see more of? Right. This is also on the agenda for discussion at Monday's city council meeting. So I'll be presenting the information there as well. If anybody thinks of anything in the meantime, feel free to let me know and we can discuss it then as well.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda is a review of the red lines on Articles 6, 7, and 9. This is really exciting stuff, people in the audience. Talk about punctuation, capitalization, case, tense.
Bill, you're on Zoom. Am I showing the proper screen share?
Let me check. Yeah.
I know I have it pulled up here. I want to make sure it's on Zoom.
Yes,
It is.
we're on
Thank you.
Article 6. Okay. John, you got your copy ready?
Yes, I do.
Planning commissioners, did you see anything in the red lines of Article 6? John should. Correct.
I did not.
All right. Article 6 is a wrap.
Yay.
Hey,
All
Bill.
right.
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
I don't have the things, but it's 6.1 exterior lighting. And I think that we had talked about having the dark sky added in. So it's 6.6, 6.6.1 exterior lighting, and then illumination maybe on 6.6.4. Not sure if that was to be added as well, but I didn't see any changes about that.
I saw that somewhere.
That was,
Yeah.
It was in there.
it wasn't in 6. It was in what we did the 2 weeks before, and it did get in. But we didn't talk about it bringing. Were we gonna bring it in both of them?
I think we probably decided not to do that. Usually, it's not good policy to have something in two places.
And in
like
2
that.
places. It was definitely in the one before.
And we may see it in 7. Let's find out.
Yeah,
Okay, point taken.
we'll keep looking for it.
All right, moving on to Article 7. We have any corrections?
I've got some stupid.
There it is. 7.2. It's now 6. There's dark sky compliant in number 3.
We probably should put it in site development standards.
All right, you guys okay with that? That John recommends putting it in the appropriate place in site development.
Yeah, it seems like it needs to go there. Kind of call out.
All right.
John, line 164, there should be a space after and. Sorry,
Where you at?
Article 7, line 164.
Oh, yep.
Line 337.
You got.
337.
It's a title.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe even-
Oh, it should be 7-2-10, not 7-2-11. You skipped. The preceding one was 7-2-9. So you're going from 7-2-9 to 7-2-11.
No, he changed the previous one to 10.
It's a 10.
It was 10. The 9 is crossed out and
10 is correct.
well, the 10 is sort of crossed out too, but I don't think it was meant to be crossed out.
Yeah, it's just how the red line moves.
Yeah,
When I accept the changes, I go back. I'll make sure that they're all numbered.
Yeah, okay. And the other, so my next, if that's the case, that's also applies for 7-2-12. Could be 7-2-12, not 7-2-13.
Yeah.
And that's all I had.
I have a general comment.
Yeah.
7.2.8. Is it the intent of the zoning code to have opinions or political statements, or is that master plan? My view is that the zoning code should not have any sort of, we want electric vehicle use to go up or anything like that. So I would like to change the wording and say the intent is to provide the establishment of appropriately installed electrical vehicle charging infrastructure with such use as necessitates. Just take out any sort of why we think it's such a good thing to have EVs.
Where are you, Chip?
The 7.2.8.
Line
Line
172.
172-ish.
Oh, 172.
Yeah,
We
we
did
talked
make some
about that and
We did make some moderations. I just want to go a little further.
We did, yeah,
Yeah, we took out encourage.
and we took out expedite.
Yeah,
Is it facilitate? Is that?
Yeah, I don't like to use facilitate. I mean, I'm just thinking that's up to the master plan, and if that master plan changes, I don't want to have something in the zoning code that is permanent like that.
Well, the zoning code can always be changed. It can only be amended, they typically are amended, so if the master plan were to change significantly, then, we would amend the ordinance too. But I think facilitate, I think it's pretty neutral.
Yeah,
That's just-
yeah.
Facilitate is just basically, I think, enabling people who have electric vehicles to charge.
Yeah, it's pretty neutral.
Okay.
We already have provides that have provide twice the.
it reads very vanilla now.
It's very neutral.
I guess I wanted more vanilla. I don't know. Go to, he's doing a vanilla to that.
There's one definition of facilitate, make an action or process easy or easier. Given there's electric vehicle in town, we'd want to make it easier to charge.
Would we? That's an opinion.
Well, given there's an electric vehicle here.
I know, I'm saying,
Oh, okay,
So
so
Chip's just going on the
Yeah.
back, just make it safe charging if.
definitely make it safe.
Somebody has to
Okay.
charge a vehicle, let's
Yeah.
just make it safe.
And have it available.
okay,
Yeah, have it available.
okay. I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right, so let's add that teaspoon of vanilla.
Thank you.
How,
Jen?
what would the wording be? John?
Something to the point of the purpose of this section is
Yeah.
to,
The intent is to provide the establishment of appropriately installed electrical vehicle charging infrastructure that such use necessitates.
So to facilitate availability.
no facilitate,
We'll provide.
provide safe.
To me, it's the
We'll
same
provide it.
thing.
I think yours is more define that you have to do something now, whereas to facilitate.
Okay.
What would you like?
It's
I'm fine with it.
I know that's what it is, but I mean,
one
it-
hand, doesn't
it needs- I don't like any sort of political charge, anything in here.
use my charging stations.
Okay, John, I'm sure you'll figure all that out perfectly.
Provide.
We already got it.
Thank you for facilitating that,
Yeah,
I'll facilitate that.
or providing that.
all right, any other changes to 7? Look at all that red line,
That's sweet.
towers. That's
Yeah,
good.
good.
That's
Okay. Next article is 9. Special land use approvals.
Other than the indentation on the.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on there. I didn't have anything else.
Yeah, and cluster zoning, moved
Mhm.
to what we're gonna look at tonight.
Yeah.
And
the land development.
development. Okay. We're good with
Yeah.
red lines. Yeah. All right, next thing on the agenda for tonight is, first look at Article 10. And, that is land development. And Don, you want to tell us about the purpose of this section and what it's all about?
Yeah, the current ordinance has a plan unit development provisions in it. It has condominium development, manufactured home, and condo hotel. They're in different sections of the code, but they're all land development options. We pulled them all together and put them in one chapter. So, and then we added, as noted, we moved the cluster housing from Article 9 over into Article 10, so that's the next land development.
All right, I think plan development is the most interesting part of this. And let me just see if we can simplify a little bit the rest of this article. The condo hotel development.
That is a Harbor Springs thing.
Yeah, I found it word for word in the old zoning code. Now I'm questioning, was that a leftover from the Hotel Janelle?
Yeah.
Discussion, does anybody remember that?
Yeah.
And do we need this whole complex thing about the front desk must be staffed and? Or is that something we could redline and get rid of completely?
This is the first time I've ever encountered condo hotel in my career. So it's something that's pertinent to
I had to read it
Harbor
over
Springs.
about 10
I know.
times.
I know.
And this is the second time I read it over 10 times.
I wasn't here. Janelle, it's kind of explains that there's history. to
Nancy,
it.
you remember?
I think that's where that came from. Don't
Yeah.
Hold me on it, but that's what I'm remembering.
And
That was-
they tried for a long time to find the right development.
Yeah, that was the first
And
time I.
tried to create a mechanism for it to occur, because there was a whole series of ownerships and stuff that happened.
Yeah.
Because that's how I remember it, but
Well, that's how the old zoning code. all
Yes, I
stuff
remember.
was certain for specific project.
Just had to be cleaned, and so it just was.
I never heard of it. What was the
We already have condominium development.
Yeah,
So I think even if we were to keep some of the language, it could just be subsections under condo development instead of it being its own separate condo hotel development.
Just the
If
way
we
it reads, I
need
just
it,
don't
yeah.
see Harbor Springs with this, condo hotel with a staffed front desk 24 hours a day. And, rental pool talks about how it's marketed. Just seems like we could get rid of the whole thing. Does anybody in the audience know why we wouldn't get?
Bill, I just wanted to say, I would equate that to like, Bay Harbor Hotel, where they're personally owned condos. And the hotel puts up the front for it and then people buy it back. I think Boeing uses that quite a bit too. So condo hotel scenario with some of their properties. I don't know, that's kind of what I get.
but does it belong in the zoning code?
Actually,
That's.
what
Yeah.
she's mentioning where they condominiumize hotels is done through the condominium act.
So this is superfluous.
This is just, yeah. I figured it had to do something locally because it's a very strange article. But you can condominiumize an apartment dwelling, you can condominiumize a hotel, you can condominiumize a marina. Okay, that's under the condominium act, so I don't know, I don't even think this is necessary.
I propose we take out 10.5, the whole thing.
Anybody in the audience have any thoughts?
Has anyone asked this? Maybe when you did the survey, so.
All right,
Another
good.
thing,
Just delete the whole thing.
another thing to keep in mind is any of those specifications under condominium hotel, we could certainly address, because when we do a condominium development, we have the ability to make requirements that would be in their
Yes.
master plan or their articles of incorporation or any of those things. So any of those specifications for 10.5, we could include as part of the discussion and approval process of 10.3 if we feel it's needed at that time, on a case-by-case basis
And we did
for
that.
their development.
We did that with the recent.
Yeah, with the Claridge property that
Claridge.
was, yeah.
All right,
So the only hotel we have is the Colonial Inn, right? And city limits hotel is the Colonial Inn, right? And if they were ever to condominiumize the rooms, we would have us in the hearing, we put conditions on it. We don't need this to do that.
Well, depending on how old this language is, it may have been generated for the Hotel Janelle project.
Right.
It may be older to address the Colonial Inn. Also remember back in the seventies and eighties and into the nineties, we had the motel down on the corner here, and I think that one of the original plans was to condominiumize that.
Okay.
So it could have come along at any point in those processes to address those.
Okay, it sounds like we have consensus to eliminate that section.
Right.
Right,
Out.
beautiful. And then, long we're just chipping away at things, cluster zoning, which was added in here, came out of, the existing code. And it's required by the state that we have
It's in the enabling act, yeah.
in the enabling. Act. So I don't think there's much to talk about on that. But we could. Okay, yeah, so we chipped away a couple things. And let's talk about plan development. Okay. So John, what's plan development all about? What's the goal?
Plan development in its simplest terms is a development agreement between the city and the developer to build a land development. And it's based on a public hearing, and it's very similar to a special use application where you have to go through a public hearing process. It ends up, the final part of it ends up being a development agreement that the city attorney actually writes, or a land use attorney, that's executed between the city, the developer, and it's recorded at the county register of deeds, and it goes with the property. And then it includes all of the performance requirements that the developer has agreed to do. So it becomes it's a legal document that is actually, it's a real estate legal document that's recorded at the register of deeds.
Is this a pretty common thing?
Very common. It's in the state statute. Communities have been using it various forms since the 70s. Primarily, it started out, PUDs were for like housing developments. In today's world, they're used for industrial parks. They're used for mixed use housing projects. You know, they're just used for a variety of unique. The nice thing about it is it really encourages innovative development and good design, because the community can actually negotiate with the developer or the applicant on the various features and aspects of the development. So it's not as hardcore as just meeting setback standards and height standards. It gets more into the creativity of the land development and the building and the architecture. So it provides the community a lot of latitude in terms of what the end product is going to be. I think it kind of, Mark's not here now, but it kind of goes with Mark was saying, that our zoning codes are so rigid. A lot of times they take the innovation out of good land development. Actually, you could end up with worse development sometimes if you follow the code. Whereas a PUD there's latitude and flexibility for both the developer and the community.
I think in addition to providing us with a little bit more latitude, it also affords us a little bit more of involvement and say in the final result. You know, an applicant could come in and say, this part of the zoning code isn't really working for me. Is there some flexibility in that? And you as the planning commission can say, yes, we're willing to bend a little bit on that, if you're willing to let us have a little bit more involvement in, let's say, the style or design of your project. We can, you know, kind of have that give and take relationship with that project and development. And this was essentially the process used for the development across the street from the movie theater. And we certainly had multiple meetings at the planning commission over the course of, I think, about 18 months for that.
Carter.
I think the only twist I've heard on this is that the community would like to know when these are getting going before it hits the planning commission. I sense that there has been some feeling that there's an attempt to hide in that case, where it's probably the developers just trying to be cautious, but getting that communication earlier, that someone is going to propose it and that there's an opportunity for them to communicate beyond just planning commission might be constructive.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, I think that there was, in terms of the development up on, in the agricultural land, there's a lot of speculation up by your place. There was a lot of speculation and there was a lot of noise in the background of that there's something up here and probably had, if that hit, I can't remember when that hit here, when you became aware of it, maybe December of 22. When there was some discussion starting on the doing a development up on
With the Bluff Gardens property.
yeah, on Bluff Garden. So I think that may have been December 22 and it was all below the horizon, and it probably at that point, if somebody's coming forward that either they're strongly encouraged to make public notice of it or have a meeting even before it shows up.
Okay, yeah, let's think about that.
Or that it's on the agenda and you're looking at it and everybody sort of knows.
Yeah, and I think Carter, the way that this is set up, there's 4 steps. There's the pre-application submission, which is conceptual in nature before the planning commission. Then there's the submission of the actual PD plan and materials, because that's going to be rather costly. So
Yeah.
there's the pre-app kind of conceptual. It's aired at the planning commission community. Then if the planning commission thinks it's got legs, then they kind of indicate that to the developer, then they start preparing more detailed plans. Then it goes through another preliminary review and a final review, but during that period, it goes through a series of public hearings. The planning commission doesn't approve it. All the planning commission does is they would recommend approval if they get that far. And then it's the city council that actually has to adopt the PUD plan.
I understand all that
Yeah.
part. I'm saying that the point of frustration that occurred on Bluff Gardens is well before any of that.
Okay,
And so
I get
I think if there's, I mean, this is, in your case, you may have a specific way in which you wanted to be notified earlier.
Well, perhaps I think, I did meet the developer because.
Scott?
I'm Scott, hi, Scott Heston, I'm 684 West Bluff Drive. I did meet the developer, we talked over a fence and he actually invited me into his house to take a look at his plans. And I think one of the takeaways that I took from that was, wow, he has spent a lot of money designing this already. He is very far into this process, and I don't know who's ever heard of that or not. If he's just doing this all on his own, or, and perhaps knowing that we would be notified if this discussion was starting to happen, would be enough for me to say, okay, clearly this is what he's doing for himself. I mean, he could plant a spaceport there if he wanted to, if he's not spoken to anybody. But I think my question was, I was very uncertain how far along in the process he was when I saw this super expensive giant plan presented by consultants flown in from California. I was pretty surprised to see that, so.
So we have yet to see anything on this.
No, we haven't seen.
And one of the reasons that it was particularly interesting to me, and he was very friendly, we were very friendly with each other, I like the fact that we could just talk over fences here, but he had in his plans a plan that would suit the old zoning code and a plan that would suit the now rescinded zoning code. This was December before I had heard about the meeting on January 3rd that there was a new zoning code being presented. And so it was surprising to me that he would have had enough information to make a new plan that would meet the requirements of the new code. And you see where this can spiral into conspiratorial thinking, which if we just known ahead of time
The conspiracy stuff went off the chart.
I mean, so many people were so upset about this, and I think if we knew ahead of time, which is what you're asking, is when somebody starts this process, it hasn't been discussed with anybody until it's notified the public that this was in the works. If that makes sense.
I hear you. I'm trying to,
Well, I'm
like a property owner could come talk to Jeff in confidence. And, if you want to do something with your property, you go talk to Jeff and say, hey, is this kosher? Here's what I'm thinking about. Jeff says, oh, no, that isn't quite the right way to read this. So I don't know, Jeff, you tell us, you have confidentiality obligations.
I mean, any documents that I have are public information. Somebody can come in and say, hey, I want to take a look at the plan that you have for this house, and people do that all the time. I think the trouble here is if somebody hasn't come to us and submitted an application for anything, how can we do any type of notice? Right, an applicant like that, in this case, he hasn't submitted anything to us yet, so we wouldn't have anything to review. So let's say for the sake of discussion that that person came in and said, here's what I want to do. And let's say we put out a notice and said, hey, this is potentially happening. It's still a potential. If people came into a planning commission meeting and said, we want to review the plans for this proposed project, we don't have any material to share yet. So how could we really put out any type of a notice, because there's no material to review? So I don't think that we could do that. Also, if somebody's just come in with a conceptual idea, Scott, let's say that you came in and just talked to me and said, we're thinking about building a deck. Would it be appropriate of me to run to all of your neighbors and say, Scott's thinking about putting a deck, do you want to have input on that, when you haven't even really fully decided what you want to do yet?
And I totally approve of that. I think this is a different world that we're talking about. We're specifically talking about planned unit development. I think the fact that I was uncertain whether this had started down a process with the city or not was what. So if I can say to myself, oh, clearly nobody's been discussing this because it hasn't appeared as a preliminary hearing, then that's enough information. I don't have any.
Did you ask him, and did he tell you that he had gone through the city?
No, and this is, again, this is what I worry about, is when I see these, the plans, which, again, very nice guy. He showed me these plans. It was lovely to be involved in that beginning process. So I really appreciate that. I was very confused when I saw two different plans, one for the old zoning code and one for the new zoning code, and I hadn't even seen the zoning code. It was being presented on January 3rd.
The draft was online for months.
And that's probably exactly the issue. And I wasn't even looking at this until all of a sudden January 3rd came up, and I read the whatever was gonna happen at the meeting. And I was just surprised that there was a new code, because I had missed it. Having lived here 5 years, I had just missed it all.
So
I don't know how you could have codified that. That's the problem. If someone can spend any kind of money they want to, planning and doing whatever,
Yeah.
at a certain time.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I hate to say this, but some of the best work I've ever done has never been built. Because I work for somebody and they go through this, spend a lot of money to get to a design development to that point where they can work with it or not, and then something happens and it goes upside down. And people will spend a lot of money on conceptual stuff.
So let me just turn this into a specific productive point here. We're talking about PUDs, we're not talking about anything else. We're talking about a major land change. And we realize that if somebody's thinking about something you don't know about, you can't publish it. Those are all options. I think that the main point is, if they do engage, open a record and publish that someone is thinking about a PUD, it's Fred Smith, here's his name, and tell the applicant that, look, if you come to the city and sit down with us, even if you're gonna start this, we're just gonna let the city know, because in this city, people get really frustrated if they don't know the big giant things being built next to them. And if you want your project to get through, it makes a lot of sense to start communicating with your neighbors now, and not just think, hey, we'll go through the city and get it done.
Well, we typically advise, if I have the opportunity to talk to a developer as they're working on their feasibility concepts like Mark, I always recommend that they go and talk to their neighbors.
So let's stick it in the code.
Yeah, just go talk to your neighbors. Actually, sophisticated developers will talk to their neighbors to get a handle on, if there's gonna be any objection to the type of development they're proposing. Like, like Mark says, I've seen really nice illustrative plans done by developers, and they do it intentionally to pencil it out to see if it's even cost effective.
You have to get to a certain point.
So what I'm hearing is that maybe it's more of a process step for the city and Jeff. If somebody is making any noise at all about a planned development or something major like that, Jeff could.
But Bill, under the new provision, if they approach Jeff there's that pre-application step.
Right.
Yeah.
That they need to come before the planning commission and the public to talk conceptually about what they want to do, even before they really start spending big bucks on the application.
10.2.6 in the code outlines our review procedures. And in there, we have this nice little diagram showing the, you know, like John mentioned, steps 1 through 4 here, and kind of describing what needs to be done at each step. All of this would at minimum be a notification on the agenda, hey, we're discussing this. Also included in a couple points are public hearings where we would do mailings to the surrounding property owners to that project. So there's ample notices given to property owners in every step of the way. And you know, at minimum, it looks like it's at least 4 to 6 meetings with public hearings in there. Realistically, though, it's probably gonna be more. You know, like I mentioned with the project that we had downtown, that took about 18 months, and we had 7, 8, 9, 10 meetings discussing different aspects of that project with, again, multiple public hearings here at the planning commission and ending in at least a meeting. I don't know if it was a public hearing at city council. So there's certainly a lot of notice built into this, identifying, hey, we're talking about this. And you, if you want to participate, you can come to these meetings to participate.
I think though that when it comes here, I think that there's a lot of formality to it, that a lot of folks think that it's already, whether it's perceived or whether it's correct in other communities, and other planning commissions that I've sat on, we've actually been given the heads up months in advance when something's coming. And it has, they haven't shared anything with us, but they would say, hey, you should know this property on this corner, we're having interest in it. And it's just enough that it might spark interest, or it just gets it out there.
Yeah, I think that having looked through Hotel Janelle, along with Irish, what went on recently, the fact that we're not having this communication earlier is part of the reason why people get pissed off. Right, so I don't know if it's unique to here, but I'm just summarizing really a lot of different perspectives I've heard. So, and I think simply, like, when they start sitting down with you and saying, I'm thinking about this, just publish it in the planning commission meetings, just as a notice, or I'm not positive exactly what that vehicle is.
I hear you. I totally hear you.
Just, hey, this is up, and this is, Fred is doing it, and there's no secret about it, and that's what's going on, and call Fred if you got a problem.
And make sure you go to the next planning commission meeting or something like that.
I hear what you're saying. I just don't know how.
I don't know how we would do it.
Right, if someone is thinking about something and I'm not sure, you know, to go talk to my colleagues, and I will go talk to Jeff, and all of a sudden it's in the paper. Well, we don't even have the finance,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay, so let's not try to solve it tonight. Let's take it as a request and a suggestion.
I definitely can hear Jeff maybe saying, and he probably does, you know, okay, you're thinking about this. Have you been out talking to the residents of that area about what you might be thinking of doing? That might not be a bad idea. I may be doing something like that, you know, as in the course of the informal discussion with Jeff, but I don't think it's in his purview nor the cities to say, oh, let's publish it in the paper, or,
No.
you know, even make it public to the planning commission. If it's just something in somebody's head and they share it, I don't know, maybe I'm all washed up.
Another factor I think that's important to keep in mind is, what if, for the sake of discussion, somebody doesn't come to me with any of these thoughts before they come to the planning commission? If there's an expectation that if somebody comes into me and says, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, so I do whatever we've talked about. Let's say in the next situation, somebody doesn't come to me with any of these thoughts or ideas, and they just submit their application. Now there's an expectation, Jeff, why didn't you notify us? of
Right,
this
or
ahead of
there's,
time?
if let's say the person, you know, Scott had the conversation, in the guy's house, you know, whatever, and, you know, then, is the expectation that Scott now runs and tells a city administrator who then calls the guy, what? How come you didn't, you're sharing something that you never even told us about? But, you know, it just, it's a sticky wicket.
I am communicating what people,
Yeah.
a large amount of people have said, I think table it and figure it out.
Yeah, let's-
And make it specific, and it's not gonna solve everything.
And then timing wise, is a month notice, because you need a month from when you get the application to the next meeting, is that correct?
And it's probably fine.
Okay, so it just seems like that would check off that this needs to be published when you get the application for them to do their due diligence for the next meeting.
They're showing up to him a year before they're even gonna come to you. Probably, if they're doing a
I
project.
would think so.
All right, so
especially
let's take
for
it, let's
something
take
that
it as a
large.
suggestion and a request from the community, to see if there is some type of early warning. Process stuff or something in the zoning code or something somewhere else. So let's sleep on that one. Thank you for netting that out. Appreciate it. All right, other thoughts?
Are we almost done with 10?
No.
No, okay. I think I saw the word solely, as I was writing. And John and Jeff and Bill, John Wayman is convinced that the word solely is gonna allow, and I can't explain it, but you've all talked to him about it. Is that word still in there?
So I just pulled that up, what she's referring to, and I have had some conversations with John about this. In 10.2.4 are qualifying standards for a planned unit development. If we look at standard D, the planned development shall not be allowed solely as a means of increasing density or as a substitute for a variance request. And I believe, and correct me, he's not here tonight, but I believe his main concern was the inclusion of that word solely. And that because we use the word solely, someone could do the plan development. And one of the other side reasons could be to increase density. So,
Isn't that the whole purpose of the PUD?
I don't know that the purpose of a planned unit development is to increase density. I think that the purpose of a planned development is, let's say that somebody wants to do something that's outside the norm as far as, let's say, style goes. Let's say that I own a piece of property that's 10 acres. And if I just wanted to do a normal subdivision, I could chop that up into 25 lots, and they're all cookie cutters, rectangle lots going down the line. I envision that a planned development is something where somebody says, I don't want cookie cutter lots. I want to have my road zigzag through, and I want the lots. Let's say I want to have all my lots be triangle shaped, and it's just the nature of my idea, right? Or cluster zoning is, I think, another example where somebody says, I don't want all of my lots to be a quarter acre or half acre. I want to have smaller lots, but then have large land around it to buffer it from neighbors.
Or you want to implement a park in it,
Exactly.
Right.
green space.
It's, so, you know, certainly density is part of that discussion. And does it provide an opportunity to deviate from density? I think there's options in there, but I don't think it means that somebody can say, I'm gonna do a planned unit development and I'm gonna triple the amount of density.
You take the word solely out.
Yeah.
Just take it out.
We can take it out.
I think it makes sense in there. But I think it is written perfectly right now.
Okay.
My feeling is that, I think when we're looking at these standards, I think it would be inappropriate to look at just D without also taking into consideration the wording in A, B, and C.
That's correct.
Because solely, if you were to look at just that one section, the inclusion of that word, I think could be concerning. But when we temper it with the other standards of A, B, and C,
And E.
it takes, you know, it further defines what we're looking at as far as what's acceptable for density. But by all means, whatever you guys think is appropriate, we can adjust.
I think. I mean, you've got, that's not the only qualifier.
know,
All those other points are qualifiers as well.
A, B, C,
Exactly.
E, and out of E, you have to have four.
Yeah, E, you need 4 of the 8 objectives on the next page.
It's not the only qualifier.
No, I think we're making a matter of ball.
He won't be back till the end of May, so.
All right, any concerns on solely? Okay,
Doesn't bother me.
let's leave it for now. We're gonna sleep on it. Nothing's cast in stone yet. All right. How about other thoughts on the process and wording in plan development?
I have a few, and they're all small. This is the rundown of all the grammar and stuff like we've done before. Article 10.1, I don't have the line number in my copy.
Oh, that's right, I don't either.
Line 3 of that paragraph, change the word singly to singularly. I think that's what was meant.
I actually looked that up for the same reason. That's a word.
It's a word.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you like it in, we'll keep it.
I changed it to singularly and then I thought I'd better look it up so I don't sound stupid.
Yeah, that'd be a good Scrabble word. I just thought it was an error. If it's correct, leave it in. Article 10.2, section C, last line.
Yeah.
Change R to and. Of the city and their immediate neighborhoods.
I don't think we even need that last, and are there immediate neighborhoods? Does that even make sense?
And it's supposed to be.
But the city and there, who's there?
Yeah, is it the city's
The
immediate?
city's immediate neighbor.
Like other jurisdictions?
Like townships?
Who cares?
I read that as adjacent neighborhoods to this project. To the plan development.
Within the
project.
city.
Yes, within the city. That was my interpretation.
That's how I enter.
Do we need those last 4 words?
You don't necessarily need them. no.
Take them out. It's fine. Section E of 1.2. The word bulk kind of threw me. We have density defined. I propose we change the word bulk to density just for consistency. No?
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Mark made a point on the special land use permit application. I think Mark said the building, I think you said it had too much bulk.
Out of scale.
Out of scale.
I see. Mass of a single structure. Okay, I understand. Okay, that's fine. Leave it in. It is not defined. I don't know if we need a definition in 14 or not. For bulk, yeah. The fact that I misinterpreted it as density of a group, but I'll let you decide that, John. You've got power of the pen.
John can correct me if I'm wrong here. I know in our old zoning code of 2015, we have a section that states that if we do not have a definition defined in our code, that we would default to the general Webster's dictionary definition. And I think that words like bulk and mass, do we have something in our code that states something?
I'd
to
have
that
to look at
effect?
Article 14. I think Article 14 had a couple of conditions in it.
I think we have something that covers that to say, if we don't define it, here's where we go for a definition.
That's fine. It's not.
Did you mean a definition on specificity? I mean, like, how big is bulk?
Well, no.
Okay, I mean, you want to try to keep it subjective.
I interpreted the word bulk as number of buildings in a given real estate land size, and that's density. I didn't know what bulk was in terms of the bulkiness of a building. So. But I don't rate these things. We can let it all go. Okay. Section A of 10.2.4. You've been doing this just as a matter of, moving through things.
Ken, before you get started, I just quickly looked up the definition of bulk. It's the mass or magnitude of something large.
Okay, that's perfect. I feel better. I'm gonna sleep better. Article 10.2.4, section A. You've done this 4 is, since we haven't yet specified the
I have
distance.
that note, insert the district.
Exactly. Section C of 10.2.4, question for the group, should we add utility along with service and facility? Gotta look up the spot here.
I read that too. I don't know what else it would mean besides
Yeah,
utility.
when the proposed land use will not material add service and facility loads.
We put utility in front of service, that would define what the service is, what it's referencing.
I guess service could be like leaf pickup and
Please.
sidewalk.
Oh, services.
Yeah.
I think service and facility takes a lot of things into consideration.
If service includes utility, then I'm happy.
But it includes more than just utilities, so
I mean,
if
service
you put
could be-
utility in front of it, we're getting too specific now.
I agree.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
didn't realize you had to include.
I'll
stuff like
retract
all
this
the other
suggestion.
stuff.
That's fine. And let's see, 10.2.5, section A. Should we add city utility infrastructure impact as part of those lists? We're talking about traffic impacts, environmental impacts. Should we include that or not? Or is it already included in the wording? I don't see
We
it.
could put it in there,
Yeah.
utility assessment.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Because we'd want to see that on any subject
Okay.
anyway.
All right, that's fine. The last couple of nits I have is 10.6. I realize we kind of skipped over this. These are small. It was the same thing. 10.6, section H.
Can you give me the section number again?
Yeah, 10.6,
10.6.
Article 10, item H. We have
10.2.
10.26?
No, he's in ten.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, we kind of skipped over cluster zoning earlier, but this is a nit. In the list under item H, we have lots of things. But once again, we didn't have impact on utility infrastructure, wondering if we should include. And that's it. Thank you. Okay, I yield back.
All right, I got one. Everybody else? Or can I?
Go ahead.
All right, 10.2.8. PD application and determination. A2. I cannot understand the paragraph. All applicable provisions of this article shall be met, period, right? Any provision of this article shall be in conflict with the provisions of any other section of this article. The provisions of this section
Should be any other section of this ordinance.
Oh. Requirements kind of trump everything else that, okay.
I just had a philosophical question.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the qualifying standards and 10.2.4 in E, we say that the PD must meet as a minimum 4 of the following 8. Where did 4 come from? And of the 8, are there some that are more important than the others?
I think I look at them as all equally important.
Okay.
4 is, you have to meet at least half of
Okay.
They seem to be, the top 6 seem to be different than 7 and 8 a little bit, but.
7 and 8 feel different?
Yes, they're almost like in a different category, but to Vanessa's point, I believe number 5 in that list, to promote the goals and objectives of the city of Harbor Springs master plan. A PD needs to promote, needs to speak to the master plan, I believe. And I'm almost thinking that almost should be lifted and put into E. The PD must meet, the PD must meet components of the city's master plan.
And then have the other.
And meet a minimum of
3 of the 7.
3 of the 7 or 4 of the 7 or something like that. I just think that, that
And I like having more than half. I like 4 of the 7. get one of those out of there.
Well, again, 7 and 8 are
To bring them up.
are different to me than, have a different feel than 1 through 6.
Yeah.
Which I like 7 and 8. And that's often the purpose of why somebody would bring a PD forward because of 7 and 8. That's going to be, I would think,
Almost low.
one of their objectives of bringing a PD to bring about, and then, but we want to see those other things in there as well. So I'm probably not wording it in a way that is very articulate.
No, I think what you're
Apologize for that.
getting at, Michael, is you want to take 5 and make it a new E.
Or
Part of, part,
put it in.
part of the, I believe that, you know, a planned unit development is seeking to do something different, creative. Maybe it is related to density, it might be related to architectural style, creative, etc. But still, it should demonstrate that it meets the goals of the city's master plan.
Then
Let's just check that idea with the group. So the idea is, should it be a firm requirement for a PD request that it?
It
meet
might not
certain
hit
goals of
every
it?
single goal of the master plan, but I don't think we need to word it in that way, but
No,
I just.
I think you can make 5E and then have F, but then Vanessa's saying 4 out of 7.
Well, I like 4 out of 7, but it's just that 7, okay, so 1 through 6. They're really design considerations. It's buffers, it's open space, it's design, it's layout. And 7 and 8 are very different. They feel very differently. They're about.
We don't specify exactly what we're looking for, so I think that's part of what Michael's.
Yeah,
saying.
bring about orderly change. Okay, well, someone can say, yeah, okay, this is orderly change.
Right.
I just think it's very hard to qualify 7 and 8, 1 through 6, that's site design. We could do that all day long. 7 and 8 are just very different.
They're goal based.
Yeah.
Right, and to me, that's why someone is going to bring about planned unit development, because they want to bring about a redevelopment of some sites where orderly change of use or is going to be transformative or desirable.
So I don't know where the two of you guys are going. You want 7 and 8 out?
Okay, so I think when we talk about standards, I think we think design standards. We think site design standards, and 1 through 6, that's that. But then 7 and 8 become goals. And I just don't know if this, I just didn't know if this was the right spot for it.
5 really isn't a design standard.
Nope.
It's what I think any developer coming in here should be very well versed in the city's master plan
Yeah, I
and
get
be
that.
able to point to specific goals that development furthers for the city's
Yeah,
plan.
I think that's appropriate.
So
I'm just trying to get my arms around what Vanessa's
7 and
saying.
8 are very different.
Well, they're different. 7 and 8 is encouraging redevelopment of existing buildings. And number 8 is saying to provide a diverse mix of housing options and styles.
Which are great,
Yeah.
But
but it's a little different than.
it's, I guess
I mean, they could be 5 million and 10 million, so I mean, that would be a different price points and variety.
I don't have a problem with leaving them in there.
I just gotta get over
It's just.
standards. I'm sorry, I gotta get over it. I'm over it.
Bill?
Yeah.
Just a thought here, part of the logic that I heard from Al, like, I think on the, like, this was, the fear that the city would get sued. This is going back a few years. The city would get sued by a developer at some point for arbitrary and capricious components of the code. And the old code had a lot of arbitrary and capricious components, like the building should be in the style of the city. So you might talk to council or something, just to look like Hotel Janelle and some of that, if you got arbitrary and capricious stuff here that then the planning commission says, well, we're sticking our finger on this, you will get your ass and have in the past. And I think you just might be, with planned unit development in particular, there's always loss.
There's what?
There's always loss. So I think that you should make sure that these are not arbitrary and capricious, where the arbitrary and capricious from the standpoint that it depends on who's sitting on the planning commission.
Yeah.
And that somebody else would say something different if somebody else was sitting on the planning commission, it really has nothing to do with the city's interests.
Okay.
John, am I correct in assuming that planned developments are not specific to residential development? So can commercial developments be planned development? Right, so, right, so, yeah, so under 10.2.7, number 2, that, when I read that, that struck me as being very residential centric. And I mean, should we specifically call out commercial developments? Let's see, what I'm saying, it's dwelling unit density and types, building areas, floors is contemplated, streets, you know, I don't know, there's not really any mention of
into one intent purposes and commercial zoned areas.
Yeah.
That's the mixed use component.
Yeah, right.
So it goes both.
No, I get that. I'm just wondering why we were so specifically maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but my interpretation of that point that I just made was it was extremely residential centric. And I just wonder whether or not there should be any mention of development beyond residential. Because it says the request shall be submitted to the city. Submission shall include information required below. And then, you know, point number 2 seems to me to be primarily discussing residential development.
So you want some language to
not limit it to just
not
residential.
the fact that
Yeah.
commercial may be in the mix.
I mean, if everyone's comfortable with it, that's fine. But when I read that, it just seemed like, well, you know, what about commercial development? What about industrial development?
What is doing that to you? Is it the pedestrian circulation? Is that what makes you feel that number 2 is residential?
I think he's looking at the fact that it says dwelling unit.
Right.
As opposed to some other phrase there.
Exactly.
That would include commercial units or some type.
Right.
It does say dwelling unit density and types.
And then it says buildings with floor plans.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, buildings or floor areas could be anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be residential. If you guys don't think it's a big deal, that's fine, but that's when I read that, I thought, well, gee, I thought commercial and industrial were part of this process.
Let me just insert something. Let me insert. After it says dwelling unit density and types, let me put something in there that would be commercial centric.
Yeah, if you feel like it's appropriate, sure.
What would happen if you just remove the word dwelling and it just said unit
Unit,
density?
That's what Nancy was saying.
Yeah, you could do that too.
That might work.
Yeah. Simple, okay, like that. All right.
Right, what else is on your mind? And
So
Sure.
back to what Vanessa and Michael were talking about. When the proposed zoning came out, a lawyer that I consulted talked about that the proposed list on that PD, we talked about him just earlier. He says essentially hands developers a tool to remake the zoning code for their properties as they see fit. So I think it's a little bit up to interpretation or capricious, like he was saying. And they don't, he says that they don't really impose any reasonable limitations on what can be done, which could lead to scattershot development throughout the city. So it was a piece that we wrote about earlier, but I just wanted to add that in.
Okay, now let's talk about that. So one of these requests needs to be approved by the planning commission after multiple hearings and a whole lot of public input. So I guess I wouldn't agree with the fact that it gives a developer a clear shot to do whatever they want to. In fact, if somebody is crazy enough to bring one of these requests to us all, they are gonna get just microscoped. And we're, you know, people in the audience are gonna have all kinds of suggestions for them. Well, I just don't see that. I mean, I see a lot of checks and balances that would prevent something bad from happening. And then city council has to approve it with a whole lot more input. And what was their second point? Scattershot?
It was more that list of, you know, doing 5 out of 10 or 4 out of 8.
Yeah.
And that 2 of them were different than the others. It just sounds like it wasn't quite structured well enough.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just building on a point, legally, a PUD or this type of land use does give a lot of freedom, and then there should be checks and balances. Like when development, I don't think you can solve this necessarily, but when developments go on, there's a lot of interest. Like if this is in the DDA, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So there is a alignment issue in that if somebody goes, and I think even in the Hotel Janelle, there was positive, but I think it pretty much the neighbors felt pretty much alone on that conversation without much support from the city, their interpretation. And then when they sort of raised things, they felt like there was nobody on their side whatsoever.
Okay.
So I don't know, John, I don't know if you know another way to deal with it, but there's just fear of this type of stuff. Because there's often tax incentives that go along with it and a lot of other things that motivate the development. You know? And I think that's what she's mentioning.
We've mentioned, you know, multiple public hearings. But I only, you know, it goes to city council, obviously, that's a public meeting. You know, first comes the planning commission for that pre-application, but and how things are written now, I see one public hearing. And that's in kind of that step 3. Are we assuming that city council, when it comes to city council, we would open it up for public hearing? A formal public hearing, I'm suggesting, you know, not, obviously it's an agenda item and public can comment and such. But I'm seeing one public hearing, I don't know, maybe I'm reading this too literally.
Yeah, in some cases where you have PD, where it spans multiple months, you have sometimes the public hearing it stays open for like 2 or 3 consecutive months. Okay, I mean, that's, in some communities, that's what they do, just to bypass the requirement that you have to publicly notice in the newspaper, and so they just keep the public hearing open. When I've sat in on city council meetings, not here in other places, here too, I see very little difference between a public hearing and a public meeting. They're almost,
I
almost the
agree,
same
but
thing.
do we want to formalize it and say city council will also conduct a public hearing when it comes to them?
That's a local decision. You could do that.
Because, you know, we're a formal body of 5 people. You know, and planning commission has conducted their public hearing. When it comes to us as a recommendation, or if it does, do we want to formalize it and add a public hearing there? That's a question. I don't know. It's a rhetorical question or a real question, I guess.
But typically, the way that these are set up is that The planning commission does all of the legwork, they hold the public hearing, they collect the information. And then when the planning commission gets to a point where they are comfortable approving outright or approving with conditions on a PD, then they put together what is called finding of fact, which is really the skeleton of the legal document. Then the planning commission approves the finding of fact, and then they make their decision. And then all that is sent up the food chain to the council. And the council sees all the documents, the application, the finding of fact, and the planning commission's decision. Then at that point, it's up to the city council. If they want to consider it, they want additional information, or if they want to take some action on it, either to approve or deny. But at the planning commission's responsibility is to do all of the kind of like all the gathering of the documents and, you know, all the testimony and everything that goes into it.
Okay.
Trust me, I think you've been through a PD process or something similar downtown, but Jeff's right, the last one that I worked on pretty recently, probably 6 months ago, it lasted about 18 months of public review at the planning commission, documentation, additional studies that were requested. And if you thought the FUP process today was kind of detailed, you go through a PD process, it's very.
That's a good question. I think my thought would be, let's leave it to city council to decide how they want to act on something.
Well, I think, Bill,
Project.
if I'm not mistaken, the state statute doesn't require city council to hold a public hearing on zoning ordinance. But when the zoning code, the proposed code went up to city council, they decided to hold another public hearing. So that's their discretion.
Okay, so let's leave it to then city council.
I did have a couple of wording types of things.
Okay, let's.
I can defer to others.
I just have one more, but if you want to go ahead, go ahead.
I thought 10.2.8. A3. That last sentence was really awkwardly written. There's something I think missing there. It may be infrastructure and service, and other. There will be at the time of development an acceptable means of disposing of sanitary sewage and of supplying the development with water in the road network, stormwater drainage system, and other public infrastructure and services are satisfactory. And to ensure that to ensure they are satisfactory, there's something awkward about that very last.
I think it might need more commas. Because the.
After service.
You don't know.
And
Other public infrastructure and services.
Our service.
I would put a comma in after sanitary sewage.
I think, Michael, I think you have to read and other public infrastructure and services are satisfactory.
Comma, are satisfactory.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's how you have to read.
Okay, that's. The problem, I didn't read it like.
gonna
that.
work on that.
10.2.14 amendments to the plan development plan. Proposed amendments or changes to an approved PD plan and or PD development agreement shall be presented to the planning commission and shall decide whether, is it who shall decide?
Yeah.
Do we put administrative review committee as a placeholder? Or are we definitely gonna have one? I know we've had some discussions. It seems at previous.
I don't think we know yet.
Okay, because for a minor amendment to a plan, development, PD, it states that the administrative review committee may review, do we?
Usually a minor amendment without an administrative review committee just goes to Jeff.
Okay.
So the administrative review committee was gonna be planning commission chair, zoning administrator,
Right.
much more people involved.
Our existing zoning code right now has something sort of similar. We have language that states that if the chair of the planning commission, the city attorney, and the city manager feel that a change is minor enough in detail, they can grant me the authority to approve it administratively.
Okay.
Which in essence is essentially kind of the idea of that
The
review
ARC,
committee.
yeah,
So we're
totally.
kind of already doing that to some extent. If they feel that it's not appropriate to approve individually, then they can kick it to the planning commission.
Right, I recall an earlier conversation upon when we were reviewing previous articles that
We had Article 6 was site plan review, and we had the administrative review committee.
Okay, I didn't know if we did or not,
I believe that from our discussion at that time, we were gonna hold off on the decision of whether to keep the administrative
Right.
review committee
That's what I
until
thought.
after we got through with Article 3, where we go through the uses and the approval process.
That's what I thought, so my point is if we can just kind of circle that and come back to it, and if we need to further specify who can make the minor amendments, then we should at that time. One last thing, I'm sorry to monopolize this. And that's 10.2.14B, major amendment, again, a wording issue, the planning commission shall hold a public hearing consistent with the requirements in Article 12 as part of its review and make a recommendation. How about and shall make a recommendation or will make a recommendation?
Should be shall.
Cut them off.
You're not done yet.
Get them out of here.
John, 10.2.8, the paragraph D, is the intent of this ordinance to allow the council to approve a plan that the planning, a PD that the planning commission has voted against. So in other words, can the council override?
Technically, yes. Will they? Probably not.
Well, right, okay, if that's the intent, then the way that's written is accurate.
They can.
Yeah.
Wow. They can.
Okay. All right, I've got one. When we went over the special land use review process, we decided that it would take 6 out of 9 members to vote yes to approve. This is way bigger than just a special land use approval. Should we have the same conditions? To require 6 positive votes for planning commission to approve of one.
Are you
No, there's a difference.
So, okay.
Okay, special use permit stops with the planning commission. Okay, so the decision on a PD, the approval of a PD is with council. All the planning commission does is make a recommendation.
Okay, all right.
You're not approving anything, you're just making a recommendation.
Okay, then I withdraw that. I say, let's just keep it free form and then council can decide what they're gonna do with our recommendation. Absolutely. Okay.
John, I do have a question. Does a PD, did that go with the land as a, just like a special land use, same thing?
And that's why you have a development agreement that's registered at the deeds, registered deeds. Now, if another if a PD was approved, recorded, and then it never happened. And then there's a termination and expiration, so there's expiration provision But let's say somebody else right after it was approved, the developer decided, I don't want to do it, and they sold the property. Then they would have to basically execute an agreement with the city to terminate it. Okay.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Sounds like we're coming to a conclusion on Article 10. Do we have any other input? Yes.
Can I ask a quick question about something you guys discussed a few minutes ago? You were discussing whether there was going to be a public hearing or not. Past the level of the planning commission and encoded the code. And did I clarify that you guys said that you did not wish the city council to require a public hearing post the planning commission?
I think what I said, Scott, was that's really the prerogative of the mayor and city council to determine if they want to have the public
Yeah, I guess we can't
That's
put
the
something
question.
in.
Yeah, is that what we all agree is appropriate?
hearing. Yeah, that's their prerogative.
Yeah, we can't tell them.
They're the boss.
Yeah, they're
We
the boss.
did, and we did so.
No, you guys.
No.
The code, what they had to do.
But it's planning code.
Are they bound by? I don't know.
I haven't put it in a code. I haven't seen any code where the code dictates that the council has to have a public hearing. Typically, if the council feels that there's enough community concern, they're gonna hold a public hearing. I mean, they're the elected officials. So.
And are we good? Still good with that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. All right. You wanna do your magic, John, and bring it back at the next meeting?
Yeah, let's do the magic and bring it. I'll bring this back and then maybe since it's 8:11, I know that we've been at it a while.
Yeah, we're
Maybe at the next meeting, we start Article 5. And what I'll do, guys, go ahead and do your edits. I didn't realize when I copied these over, but I forgot to put the line numbers on them. So the next, when you get these back, I'll have line numbers so we make it easier when we do edits. I apologize for that.
All right, well, now let's talk about our approach and our schedule from going forward from here. Well, we never even got close to Article 5, and that was on your agenda. So we'll need to do that at our next meeting. And the question is, when should we have a next meeting? Can we go back to our every 2-week cadence? Or do you prefer something different?
We have 3 articles to go, correct? And they're all the heavy hitters.
No, we have to get through 5. That's another preliminary in our general regulations.
5, and then you've got
2 and 3.
2 and 3 and 4.
Yeah, I misspoke. So we have to do 5, which we're gonna postpone. Then 2, 3, and 4.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
Yeah, but they're all heavy duty.
I figure those we at minimum would spend 2 meetings talking about those.
I think going into May, I think if we could push every 2 weeks would be good. If we could get through a lot of this stuff while people are here over the summer. We have more stuff to kind of present and any questions or issues with what we already kind of decided. We can have that discussion with more people over the summer.
So
I agree with that. I think we've got a lot of heavy lifting to do. And I think we should double up.
Can people make it? Can people make the meetings and do the prep?
What day do you have in mind specifically?
I guess 2 weeks from today would be May 1st. And then we're already scheduled on May 15th. And then we'll decide what happens after that.
Yeah, it works for me.
Okay.
First does.
All right, great. So we're gonna put a special meeting on the calendar for May
All that works
1st.
for everyone.
And we'll keep our meeting on May 15th as well, and then we'll decide what to do from there. All right, sounds good. Okay, any other comments from the planning commission, ideas, suggestions? Had enough? All right, audience, any other ideas for us? Okay, thank you so much for participating today. It was really helpful. And thanks for your endurance, forbearance, and many other things. Thanks, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.